Okay, so the sixth chapter is the most important chapter, and we'll do it in two parts. So pay attention because those who are especially interested in doing clinical psychology will have a lot of use with this chapter, and even because this is basic, so this is something that you're going to study more in detail in your third year of BA psychology also, if you want to pursue psychology. Okay, so okay, now what is abnormality? So anything which is basically deviant, which deviates from normal, is abnormal. Okay, so here, any deviation which also leads to personal distress and impaired functioning. Okay, but we'll also speak about it more in detail. Now, what are psychological disorders? So the
Ma'am,
nature of, yeah.
what is the definition of abnormality? I mean, what do we write?
You don't have a very specific definition, but anything which basically is anything that deviates from normal, okay, that is called abnormal. So, but, and you can mention this, what I've highlighted over here, okay.
So, any
Deviance,
deviance, personal distress, and impaired functioning is
any,
abnormality.
yeah, any deviance from normality is which leads to personal distress and impaired functioning. That is what you can write, because that is what is given in the textbook for third year psychology. They define abnormality as deviation from normal. That's all. Now these three words are more than enough for you to describe abnormal, but it also, in case of psychological disorders, it leads to personal distress and impaired functioning, and this is something that you'll also study a little later in the chapter where we are studying the criteria for abnormality. Okay, so now what is the nature of psychological disorders? Okay, now we observe that it's not very easy to distinguish normal behavior from abnormal, because what we may think is normal is abnormal, say, somewhere else. For example, abroad, if they see that children who are, like, say, above 16 and 18 still living with their parents, it's abnormal. But in our case, it's absolutely normal. Okay, so whatever, it's not very easy to kind of distinguish normal from abnormal all the time. This is because illness and absence of illness are not clearly two different categories as we think. It's a continuum. Continuum means that it doesn't have pole, like this is extreme one pole and this. It's like north and south. Okay, now from Mumbai, say, Delhi is north. For Delhi, Mumbai is south. In the same way, for south, say, for Chennai, Mumbai is north. So you can't say that this is, you can't clearly say that from this part onwards it is south and from this part onwards it is north. Okay, maybe for Kerala, say, even something like uh, Goa is north, right? So we can't clearly distinguish that this is illness and not illness. So that is why it's a continuum. So Keyes gave the mental health continuum model, where he spoke about the 4 stages, which is between, say, green is healthy and red is unhealthy. So these 4 stages in general are somewhat, they don't have clear distinguish. You can't clearly distinguish them. So the first stage is stage 1, which is extremely healthy. Second is moderately healthy, then moderately unhealthy, and extremely unhealthy. So the first stage, which is extremely healthy, according to mental health continuum, is where individuals are positive, they're functioning well, they have a stable mood, calm, peaceful, and satisfied with life. They're motivated, energetic, physically and psychologically healthy, content, and satisfied. Okay, so you can only read the main, the highlighted part, since you all have already studied the chapter first. So right now it's okay if you just read the highlighted part that we've done in this chapter. The second stage, because see, anyways, in your answer, you can't write the whole huge paragraph. You have to keep it brief. So read what is highlighted. In the second stage, you are neutral but sometimes reactive. You do feel nervous and worried at times. You are affected by stressors of life. For example, in general, you're calm, but when it comes to exams, you may feel stressed out. You may feel that, oh my God, how will I manage this? Okay, sometimes you may doubt yourself. it may cause anxiety, affect performance, and feel tired very soon, lack of energy. And say while facing the examination or at the time of interview, you are feeling anxious. Okay, so that is the stage 2. uh, but in this stage, if individual becomes realistic and accepts their limitations, or the constraints which are placed by the environment. So when you know that, okay, I have limitations. For example, you may be stressed about exam because you don't have enough space to study in your house, you don't get the time to do it, or maybe you're working. So if you're realistic and if you know that, okay, environment is putting these constraints on me, you will manage to reduce stress and have a healthy lifestyle, adequate rest, and basically you can lead more towards positive, healthy functioning. Okay, the next stage is when individuals are at this stage they show signs of positive impairment, okay, and damage. Now, psychological damage, and it's kind of moderately ill. Okay, they have negative feelings like sadness, fear, inadequacy, restlessness, irritability, lack of okay, we've given an example here, example Sanju. Okay, and here also we've marked that stage 1, great father, great husband, loving and caring. And stage 4, man starts drinking too much after losing a job. So this is the stage 3 where overall apathy, that is, you don't kind of feel happy emotions, or emotions, like you're not expressing your emotions so much, you're not motivated, irritable, you feel inadequate. Okay, people may also, relationships get strained, people may also turn to drug abuse, alcohol. You can still be productive in this stage, but you may find it difficult. But at this stage, a lot of people who come for counseling at this stage, they may still be productive. Okay, and they can be reversed. So they can, with professional help, you can get them back. So it's not the extreme stress that you feel. Okay, in the stage 4, it could be a major psychological disorder, extreme distress and impairment and functioning. So, for example, mental, emotional, social, and you need professional care and treatment. Uh, the next one is criteria. So, if you say something like, say, schizophrenia, extreme amount of stress may have led to that, and that comes under stage 4. Now, this is the part where abnormality is more clearly understood. So, what is the criteria for psychological disorders? An individual keeps shifting from one stage to another in among these 4 stages, depending on his or her life circumstances. Okay, so mental health professionals currently use diagnostic procedures called DSM, that is uh, Statistical Manual, and ICD, uh, which is International Classification of Disorders. And according to, at present, DSM-5 is used. Okay, so DSM is what is used in US, and ICD is WHO. Okay, so now there are 5 criteria of psychological disorders. The first one is that it has to be, we've made it CADDI, CADDI. Okay, the short form is CADD, and which is the I point. I think the fourth point, yeah, I. So the first one is that it should be a clinically significant syndrome. So you have certain patterns, behavioral and psychology of which shows that there are behavioral and psychological symptoms. Okay, and certain symptoms that occur together in a in a particular disorder. So there are clusters of symptoms. You just can't be saying that, oh, I'm feeling hallucinations, so I have schizophrenia. You can't do that. You have to have a cluster of symptoms, more than one things. Like, you must have noticed that uh, even when I write, for example, if I take a test, okay. If I've done a test for anyone of, I think I've not, but in those psychological tests, for counseling that I do, we just can't diagnose on the basis of one thing. For example, if it's a draw person test, you have to see 100 things that, oh, the eye is also showing anxiety, the way the hand is drawn is also showing anxiety, this is also showing anxiety, that is also showing anxiety. Another test done on anxiety, like this particular anxiety test is also showing this much amount of anxiety. So you have to have a cluster. You just can't have one syndrome, and that can't be diagnosed for a disorder. So that cluster of syndromes is important. Distress and impairment should, that is also there. So distress is basically psychological pain. Okay, you can remember it as DPP. distress, psychological pain. So it can arise due to feelings of fear, inadequacy. So you're feeling distressed. It means you're not comfortable, you're not, there's this constant feeling of inadequacy, restless, you're irritable. So you're not completely okay with it. You're not calm and relaxed. Okay, and it also may be due to stress. And impairment is basically inability to perform appropriate duties and roles in personal, social, and work related situations. So you don't feel like going to college, you don't feel like studying, you don't feel like talking to friends or keeping in touch with anybody. That is impairment. Okay, the next important criteria is dysfunction. Okay, suppose if these guys ask you for those 2 3 mark question to write about abnormality, then you can briefly just mention that abnormality includes. So you have to write all of these CADDI as in clinically, the syndrome should be clinically significant. Just write it in one line, in just in case if they ask you in detail. Okay, but they won't. If they do, they might just ask you for a 5 mark because this has 5 points. Okay, the next topic is dysfunction. uh, they lead to psychological, biological, developmental dysfunctions. So you may not be able to do a certain things, including biological things. Like, say, a lot of infertility issues these days come because of stress or because of mental health related issues. So that leads to a proper dysfunction. Okay, that you're unable to remember or unable to concentrate. You can't learn, or you can't even do certain biological things. Okay, the next point is that if a stressor, if response is given to the stressor, if any response given to the stressor or losses are accepted as a response, it is not considered a mental disorder. So, for example, if somebody dies and then you are very sad and you're crying and not eating, then it's culturally sanctioned response because obviously you're attached to the person and you die. So that's not called, because obviously that is also leading to all of these things. You may have a cluster of symptoms, you may have impairment and distress. Okay, you may have dysfunction, but still, because it's a culturally sanctioned thing, you cannot, I mean, it's not considered a, a mental disorder. Okay, because you're allowed to do that. See, in some cultures, you're not allowed to cry, so in that case, you that will be like a mental disorders. The next point is that, for any behavior to just be deviant or conflicting with society, um, uh, yeah, but it should not be producing, for any behavior which is just deviant or conflicting with society but not producing dysfunction or distress, then it does not become a sign of mental disorder. So just because, for example, protesting, you're going and protesting, um, you know just because it's not a part of culture or something, not culturally sanctioned, and it's, so you going protesting, that doesn't that is not considered as a mental disability because it's not causing you dysfunction or distress or disability. Okay, so and you can also be one of those people who's kind of challenging society. You are in conflict with society or social or political system, or say if you're a homosexual. Okay, that may not be culturally sanctioned, but it's not causing distress and dysfunction, so it's not a disorder. Psychological disorder or mental illness is a condition or a clinical syndrome which involves changes in emotions, thinking, and behavior. You can remember it as BET. Okay, psychological disorder or a mental illness. You got to by heart this, because if they might ask what is a psychological disorder, so it is a condition or a clinical syndrome which involves changes in BET, behavior, emotion, and thinking, or combination of these. Okay, such that it leads to distress, dysfunction, and or impairment. Okay. uh, See, as art students, you guys have to know that, okay, for example, if you're getting question a long question on abnormality, you can just try to basically mention, if it's like a 3 mark answer on abnormality and you feel that, oh my god, I just can't write 3 words like abnormality is deviation from normal, so you can mention briefly about, say, 1 2, just the headers of these points, and maybe this. Okay, this is just, I'm giving you one example for, say, abnormality. This can be used in any other chapters, because you know the content, you just have to know where to put it. Okay, now let's go to mental wellness. Okay, we spoke about those case studies where some people had a bad situation, like, had no money, or say father or mother is not well or died, and still they were hopeful about life. Okay, so now that kind of an example gives you an idea of what is mental well-being. Okay, now let's just see. Mental wellness does not necessarily mean absence of illness. Just because you are not ill, like if you don't have schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or anything like that, just because you don't have doesn't mean that you are doing well, you know. So that's why WHO said that state of well-being. Okay, um, a state of well-being is in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stressors of life, and can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make contribution to his or her community. So we made a short forms. Oh, this Tanishq by has by heart. You always mention it. So ERA, console, perform, CC. Okay, SOW stands for state of well-being. ERA, individual realizes his or her own abilities. That is IRA, and console, CUNSOL. So cope up, normal stressors. CUNSOL is basically um, yes. And then yeah, perform CC. So PAFAMCC. Okay, if you by heart this, great. Because any answer if you start with a definition which is by hearted, super marks. Okay, because the teachers know that you've studied and you've put in the efforts. Okay. So that is your definition of well-being. So basically, just because you must have seen families where they don't even fight, but they don't even communicate. Nobody sits together for dinner or lunch, or there is zero communication. People don't know what's happening in each other's life, even though they are families. Okay, they have no idea about what's happening, and uh, okay, you know that's how they are living their life. Okay, so that is not even a state of well-being, because inside they are not coping well. They are, if they are feeling depressed or sad, they will not share it with anybody. Wellness needs to be there. I mean, for a condition of wellness, you have to make sure that you're coping up with life. Okay, now based on this, how can we identify important aspects of wellness? So there are some aspects. PEL, you can remember it as PEL or LEP, LEP. L is for life, E for emotional, and P for psychological. So, what are the aspects of well-being? So, a sense of well-being, emotional aspect, a sense of well-being, feeling of overall happiness and contentment is your emotional aspect. Your psychological aspect is your state of being worthy, that is, say, high self-esteem, tendency to self-actualize, or to develop one's ability fully. Okay, the ability to take the right decision, influence the environment, um, and satisfy your needs and tendency to the society. So basically, psychological is that you are also functioning very healthily, psychologically healthily functioning. That becomes your psychological aspect. Okay. Your life philosophy, basically you have to have a purpose in life. You'll see a lot of people doing very well in life. They are well established, making good money, they have a good life in general, they have all the facilities, comforts, everything that they want, but still they're not really happy with life. There's some empty feeling. That empty feeling comes with the fact that um, the empty feeling comes with the fact that you are not having a purpose in life. You're just living your life and that's all. Every human has to have a sense of purpose, because otherwise they feel empty, they feel meaningless. And later on, when you study all of these things, you will realize that um, a lot of times that happens, that if you don't have a purpose, you face an existential crisis. Why am I living? What is the purpose? Why am I studying? What is the, and that usually comes at, say, when you hit your 20s, early 20s. Sometimes it comes, basically it comes in middle adulthood between 20 and 40. So life philosophy is important for wellness. So in short, mental wellness is a state of successful performance of psychological functions, res- uh, resulting in productive activities, fulfilling relationships with people, ability to cope with stresses, and ability to change and adapt. Okay, mental wellness is also again a continuum. So it's given by John Travis, illness wellness continuum model. So this is the illness wellness continuum. So this is the wellness, poor wellness, good mental wellness, and this is left side is mental health and right side is mental illness. Okay, so wellness and mental health leads to quadrant one. Okay, mental health and poor mental wellness leads to quadrant two. Mental health and mental illness leads to quadrant three. So mental wellness, you're mentally you're ready to cope with your life and all of that, but you have mental disorder, that is quadrant three. And the quadrant four is that you have mental disorder and you're not even well enough to cope with it. So that makes a quadrant four. Let's go into details. Quadrant one is basically you have no mental illness and you feel happy and content, and you're confident about your, okay, um yeah, and you're confident to face difficulties, you're ready for it. In general, all most of the youngsters naturally have those happy hormones and so a lot of us are usually in quadrant one. Not totally young adults, but at least kids, largely if they come from good functioning families, easy to be in quadrant one. Quadrant two is basically you have no mental illness, uh, and but you experience subjective feelings of grief or unhappiness and sees no goal in life. Why? Because quadrant two has a good mental health but poor mental wellness, no purpose. Those people who are doing well in life, they have everything they need, but um, they don't have a purpose in life. Quadrant three is you are suffering from wellness, but you experience high sense of subjective well-being. So here you have a lot of mental problems. You're going through this depression, but you're confident. I will fight it. Okay, that is quadrant three. And quadrant four, subjective well-being, basically a lot of people also use this term for happiness. Quadrant four basically is your mental illness, and but you're also distressed and you've given up hope, you have no goal. At times personality disintegration is observed. Personality disintegration basically is in those personality disorders where you are, where you're not quite yourself. Say in schizophrenia, you're not even conscious, you're not even in a condition where you understand what your condition and position is. You're totally out, you're totally dissociated with who you are and what your surrounding is and all of those things. Okay, we'll study about the disorders soon. So yeah, that is the lowest level of functioning, and obviously quadrant one is the highest level of functioning. Mental health is also not the same at all the times. So it's not that if you're mentally healthy forever. It can change when you have um, when faced with psychological illness, one can take help of an expert and can definitely regain one's psychological health. It's just like when you're sick and you go to a doctor because you're not feeling well, certainly. In the same way, in case of um, mental health, psychological health also, you can go to a psychologist and you can absolutely be okay. Some people, when it comes to mental health, because you can't see it very clearly, right? Physical health, operation karwa lunga, I'll be okay. That's why most people kind of give up hope when it comes to psychological health, but it's very much restorable. You can regain it. Now let's do mental health disorders and its classification, then we'll take a break. So mental health can be classified, has to be classified because the treatment is directly dependent on its type and causes. So unless and until you don't classify it, why do you need to classify what kind of schizophrenia is this, or is this schizophrenia, or is this bipolar, or is this a personality disorder, or is it schizoid personality disorder, schizotypal personality? You need to classify exactly, because you can only treat something if you class it properly, depending on its type and causes. Otherwise, a lot of times I've known somebody, I have had a client who said that he had schizophrenia all his life, but from his symptoms, I don't see it at all. And I said, I never thought you did. And then he obviously went for all of those lithium tests and all of those things. And then doctors psychiatrists in the government hospital also said that you never had schizophrenia. But because that person never diagnosed him properly, he went to a private doctor and he never died. He just saw some symptoms and he diagnosed it. So that man was eating schizophrenia medicines all his life, right? So it's very important that you need to classify in which type or category you put these disorders in. that's very essential. Also, that makes a practice universal. So for example, if I've diagnosed and you take the report to somebody else. So for example, if somebody is diagnosed with mental health problems, then obviously whenever they go to another doctor also, they'll get treated for it. Okay. So unfortunately, a lot of causes for psychological disorders are explained differently by various perspectives and theories in psychology. So more research is needed for this. Okay, you might have noticed that no reference of etiology or causative factors are there is no clear thing that okay, this only leads, for example, schizophrenia, nobody knows how it exactly happens, or something like say narcissistic personality disorder, we can only guess that okay, maybe parents interfering with personal boundaries in childhood could be, but you just can't clearly say ki aisa karoge to ye hoga. Just like for physical disorders, you can say that if you eat in a certain way you will become fat. Here there is no such reference or etiology or causative factors. Main emphasis is on the cluster of symptoms or syndromes. We've not become advanced enough, and nevertheless, we try to make it as scientific as possible. So, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders (DSM) and ICD International Classification of Diseases and Related Health Problems (ICD). These are the two. You have these two books. Okay, we use the DSM, so I have DSM. So in these books, there are classification of disorders, which and there are basically DSM has 22 sub broad categories of mental health disorders, and basically these kind of give symptoms that okay, you need to have 5 out of 10 to be able to. If you have 5 out of 10 of these symptoms, then you can be classified as having this disorder. The same way, ICD is created by WHO, and it's used for documenting all types of diagnoses, diseases, signs and symptoms, and basically your social circumstances also. It also so it contains a section on psychological disorders. So ICD is not just for this, whereas DSM is only for our mental health disorders. The 11th version of ICD was presented in 2019. Okay, and according to ICD 11, there are 19 broad categories of mental disorders, most of which overlap with DSM-5. So it's kind of similar. Okay, let's do major psychological disorders after a short break. Okay, do you guys have any questions?
Ma'am, if this ICD and DSM-5, you said that there are some topics which overlap. So basically, it will be less, nothing. Like only 3 or 4 will be there for each, because the rest they are overlapping some topics.
Yeah, overlapping as in the categories. I mean, I couldn't hear yours totally clearly, but for the overlapping, there's no less or more. But I know for a fact that DSM has some categories like cell phone addiction, internet addiction, I mean, addiction. All of these things are there. So, overlapping as in DSM will also have schizophrenia, and all of that will be for example, DSM will have personality disorders as one category, one will be mood disorders. So, ICD also has those categories which kind of are the same and overlap with DSM. You don't use both of them to diagnose any which ways. So psychologists in general use DSM-5, and in most of the cases they are still using 4TR. So the fourth one, which was revised, they are still using that because DSM-5 apparently has a lot of it has a lot of things that a lot of people don't agree with. In according to DSM-5, about so many of them, most of the people have some or the other kind of disorders, especially with kids in America. Most of them will have ADHD according to that. So they are basically overlapping categories, as in they have the same kind of things, same classifications, but yeah, you can use any one of them for diagnosis. We use DSM, all of us in India, in America. I'm not sure about UK. I believe they might be using ICD. But disorders remain the same, and the classification also remains the same. So you guys have any other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the exercise, there is explain the concept, and there is syndrome. So what do we write?
Here,
Syndrome का है there, it is there over here.
Page 64.
Yeah, page
Yeah,
64.
right.
From you have to
So,
like frame it how the sentences are given. The main
yes.
topic.
Yeah, I mean, wait, not here. We also saw criteria of, in that they spoke about syndrome. Basically, uh, it's a cluster of it's a cluster of symptoms together becomes a syndrome. Cluster of symptoms together. Okay, so that becomes, your answers are actually in this only. Let me get you the exact here. Yes,
Yeah,
here.
here only it is.
Here, cluster of
Page.
symptoms together is called a syndrome. Okay. So anyways, I have less than a minute. If you have more questions, let's address it in the after 5 minutes. Take a break.